You can hear me a little bit better now. Eddie's away on holiday. Eddie, who normally works our sound desk, is away on holiday, and I thought, to be really helpful and kind to John, who's helpfully and very kindly stepped in for Eddie, I thought on Friday I'll set up all the sound desk and get it all set up. But what I did when I left was I unplugged the microphone receiver and then forgot this morning that is what I'd done. So it wasn't working, but it is now. I can hear myself coming back, so hopefully it's working, and those at home will be able to hear me as well now. I'm hoping. Shall we come before God in prayer? Living God, in this building, used to the sound of singing, where there have been baptisms and funerals, where people have come to be married or to celebrate the birth of a child. This building where some have wept and some have been filled with joy, where people have struggled with the deep things of life and have prayed urgently, been stirred and changed. In this building where you have been so often before with your people, be with us again now. Amen. We've got a few notices to share with you. Yeah, do you want to come? So Trevor's going to tell you about the election of deacons in a moment, but before he does, I will just let you know that next Sunday, Sunday afternoon at 3 o'clock, we've got a Songs of Praise event here with Water Brass Band, and then the following Sunday, on Sunday the 16th of October at K Street Baptist, also at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, there is the CAP 5-year celebration of the CAP Rosendale Debt Centre, which is an opportunity to give thanks to God for all that has happened over the 5 years, and also to say farewell to Jane Morris as she moves on to her new job. Okay.
Yeah, it's that time of year when deacons are up for re-election. The 2 deacons who've served 3 years, myself and Peter Hargreaves. Seems like 30, but it's only 3.
Harvest, as Trevor's just said, and we are collecting for the food bank as well as for BMS. So please do come and be part of that, and Peter is going to be leading our service next week. And then the week after, on the 16th of October, we've got Liz Hamilton, who's coming back to take our service. A few of us were over at Leyland yesterday to celebrate with Liz for her ordination and induction there at Leyland. She's completed her 3 years of ministry training. She was on placement at Leyland, but they've called her now to be full-time minister there. And it was a really good day. And really good to be there to celebrate with her. And she will be here in 2 weeks' time, and so we'll be able to celebrate again with her then. So please do come to both of those services if you're able over the next 2 weeks. Okay. Now, I've brought a selection of things with me. So, guys, if you are colouring at the back, do you want to just put your pens down? Because I need your help a little bit. I should have put you nearer the front, really, so I'm not shouting toward the back to you guys. But I wonder if you can tell me what all these things have in common. So I've got a candle. I've got a torch. I've got a light bulb. That doesn't stand like that. And I've got a strip of LED lights. I wonder if you can tell me, what have all those things got in common, do you think? Go on, yeah? Shout at me. Lights, yeah, they all give off lights, don't they? They all give off lights, yeah? And to a lesser or greater degree, they're good at hitting people as well. But the important thing is they give off light, yeah? Now, put your hand up if you like just sitting in the dark. Good. A couple of goods. Well, you know what? Over the coming, with the energy price going up, we might all have to be sitting in the dark, might we? Over this winter. But generally speaking, we prefer, don't we, to be in the light. We prefer when we go into a house and it's dark, the first thing we might do is flick on a light switch. Yeah, back in the olden days, they might have lit a candle, okay, to light it up. When we're walking home, maybe on the streets, we perhaps maybe avoid the bits where there are no street lights, and we go where there are street lights. When I'm out walking, I had a kind of I've got a few different routes for walking the dog, and there's one that goes down a particularly dark alley, which was fine in the summer and when it was light, and we do that, but now it's dark, I avoid that and I go around a further way, because I don't really like being in the dark, especially because actually that's usually the place where he decides he wants to do his poo, and it's really hard to find and pick up the poo without getting it on your hands when it's pitch black. But we don't like really being in the dark. We head toward the light. And the amazing thing about light is that it doesn't take very much to get rid of the darkness. I wonder how many of you have things in your bedroom that emit lights. I have, next to my bed, I've got an alarm clock which gives off a little bit of light, but I also have I have my electric razor. I know it's hard to believe, but I do shave occasionally. I have my electric razor next to my bed, and on the charging stand for that is a tiny little red LED. And it's tiny, and you wouldn't notice it, except for when you turn the lights off and you're trying to go to sleep. When I first put it there, I've kind of got used to it now, so I can sleep with it. But when I first put it there, it was really distracting, and I had to sleep with my back to it, because if I was sleeping with it, just that tiny little LED was enough to disturb the darkness and make it difficult for me to sleep. So you don't need much light, do you, to get rid of darkness? In our reading from last week, we read from John chapter 1. And verse 5 of John chapter 1 says this: "The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it." And like I say, today we are thinking about finding God in the darkness. Finding God when things are difficult, when life is a struggle. How do we find God in those moments? And I don't know about you, but I find it reassuring to know that Jesus describes himself, or God describes Jesus as being the light of the world, that the darkness did not and cannot overcome. And sometimes that might be a bright, blazing light that we can absolutely see no matter where we are. And sometimes it might just be a tiny little flicker of light that we have to maybe look a little bit harder for. But no matter what situation we find ourselves in, the Bible promises that Jesus is there with us and in it. And he is the light that the darkness cannot and will not overcome. And we'll think about that a little bit later on as well. Now though, shall we sing once more? We're going to sing King of Kings, Majesty. his feet with her hair. Her brother Lazarus was ill. So the sisters sent a message to Jesus, "Lord, he whom you love is ill." But when Jesus heard it, he said, "This illness does not lead to death. Rather, it is for God's glory, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it." Accordingly, though Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus, after having heard that Lazarus was ill, he stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was. Then after this, he said to the disciples, "Let us go to Judea again." The disciples said to him, "Rabbi, the Jews were just now trying to stone you, and are you going there again?" Jesus answered, "Are there not 12 hours of daylight? Those who walk during the day do not stumble because they see the light of this world, but those who walk at night stumble because the light is not in them." After saying this, he told them, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I am going there to awaken him." The disciples said to him, "Lord, if he has fallen asleep, he will be all right." Jesus, however, had been speaking about his death, but they thought that he was referring merely to sleep. Then Jesus told them plainly, "Lazarus is dead. For your sake, I am glad that I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us go to him." Thomas, who was called the twin, said to his fellow disciples, "Let us also go, that we may die with him." When Jesus arrived, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Now Bethany was near Jerusalem, some 2 miles away, and many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to console them about their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went and met him, while Mary stayed at home. Martha said to Jesus, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that God will give you whatever you ask of him." Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise again." Martha said to him, "I know that he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day." Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. Those who believe in me, even though they die, will live. And everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this?" She said to him, "Yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, the one coming into the world." When she had said this, she went back and called her sister Mary and told her privately, "The teacher is here and is calling for you." And when she heard it, she got up quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet come to the village, but was still at the place where Martha had met him. The Jews who were with her in the house, consoling her, saw Mary get up quickly and go out. They followed her because they thought that she was going to the tomb to weep there. When Mary came where Jesus was and saw him, she knelt at his feet and said to him, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who came with her also weeping, he was greatly disturbed in spirit and deeply moved. He said, "Where have you laid him?" They said to him, "Lord, come and see." Jesus began to weep. So the Jews said, "See how he loved him." But some of them said, "Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying?" Then Jesus, again greatly disturbed, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone was lying against it. Jesus said, "Take away the stone." Martha, the sister of the dead man, said to him, "Lord, already there is a stench because he has been dead for 4 days." Jesus said to her, "Did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone, and Jesus looked upwards and said, "Father, I thank you for having heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I have said this for the sake of the crowd standing here, so that they may believe that you sent me." When he had said this, he cried with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." The dead man came out, his hands and feet bound with strips of cloth, and his face wrapped in a cloth. Jesus said to them, "Unbind him and let him go." Many of the Jews, therefore, who had come with Mary and had seen what Jesus did, believed in him. But some of them went to the Pharisees and told them what he had done. So the chief priests and the Pharisees called a meeting of the council and said, "What are we to do? This man is performing many signs. If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him, and the Romans will come and destroy both our holy place and our nation." But one of them, Caiaphas, who was the high priest that year, said to them, "You know nothing at all. You do not understand that it is better for you to have one man die than for the people than to have the whole nation destroyed." He did not say this on his own, but being high priest that year, he prophesied that Jesus was about to die for the nation, and not for the nation only, but to gather into one the dispersed children of God. So from that day on, they planned to put him to death. We're going to think about that passage, or certainly a little bit of that passage, and within the theme of finding God in the darkness in a moment. But before we do, let's sing again. Shall we stand together and sing, "Great is the darkness that covers the earth"? We all have times, don't we? Times of darkness, of sadness. Times when things are not the way that we would want them to be. And in those moments, it's perhaps natural that we might have questions. We might ask, where is God in this? Is this happening because God is allowing it to happen? Or because he's causing it to happen? Is God testing me? Is this part of some bigger plan that God has for my life? Or is it because I don't have enough faith? Am I not praying right? Am I not saying the right things to make this stop? Or is it because I've done something wrong? Is God somehow punishing me? Why doesn't God stop this from happening? Or perhaps we feel like C.S. Lewis, who wrote in his book, A Grief Observed, which was written after his wife had died from cancer. He says this: "Meanwhile, where is God? This is one of the most disquieting symptoms. When you're happy, so happy that you have no sense of needing him, so happy that you are tempted to feel his claims upon you as an interruption, if you remember yourself and turn to him with gratitude and praise, you will be, or so it feels, welcomed with open arms. But go to him when your need is desperate, when all other help is vain, and what do you find? A door slammed in your face, and a sound of bolting and double bolting on the inside. After that, silence. You may as well turn away. The longer you wait, the more emphatic the silence will become. There are no lights in the windows. It might be an empty house. Was it ever inhabited? It seemed so once, and that seeming was as strong as this. What can this mean? Why is he so present a commander in times of prosperity, and so very absent a help in time of trouble?" Like I say, that was C.S. Lewis, a man who wrote great books on faith, a man whose works still inspire so many people. And yet in that moment, after his wife had died, he essentially writes a book, and the whole book is pretty much in the same vein, saying, where is God when I need him? And I imagine that this is what Mary and Martha felt like in today's passage. They send word to Jesus, don't they, that their brother Lazarus was ill. And they would have heard the stories about Jesus healing people. They might even have witnessed Jesus doing miraculous things, because we're told that they're friends of Jesus, that they've been with him. So they, at the very least, would have heard the amazing stories of the things that Jesus has been going around doing, and potentially even witnessed them themselves. And so surely they would have thought, surely if he can do it for strangers and people that he just happens to pass in the street, then surely he will come and heal his friend Lazarus, the one whom he loves. You can kind of imagine them, can't you, watching and waiting, expecting to see Jesus coming over the hill to save their brother. And yet, as each day passes, they would probably have got slightly more desperate, slightly more worried. Where is Jesus? Why is he not here yet? They perhaps would have reassured themselves with stories of miracles that Jesus had performed. Oh, do you remember the time he did that? That guy that he healed. Or maybe with the things that he said to them. They would have told themselves, he loves us, doesn't he? He loves Lazarus. He will be here. But yet time keeps moving on. And still there is no sign of Jesus. It's not that he comes and it doesn't heal or can't heal. He doesn't even turn up. And Lazarus grows weaker, and finally, despairingly, unbelievably, they watch as he slips into death. Imagine their grief. A brother lost. Imagine the questions that they would have had as they wondered why Jesus didn't come, why he didn't heal, why their brother had to die. And so then when Jesus finally does turn up, that's the question that they have for him, isn't it? It's the first thing that both Martha and Mary say to him. If you had been here, my brother would not have died. You can kind of hear, it's almost an accusation, isn't it? Where were you, Jesus, when we needed you? Even the people who'd come to support and console the sisters had the same question, the same thought. Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying? Basically, everyone there is saying, where were you, Jesus? We needed you, and yet you didn't show up. And there's loads of things that we could say about the passage. I could stand here and talk to you for hours. Don't worry, I'm not going to. Instead, I want to look at just one particular aspect of today's story to see if we can begin to answer some of those questions that we had earlier. Because you see, in this passage, we see Jesus' emotions almost like nowhere else in the Gospels. I've said before, haven't I, that when you read Gospel stories, I think one of the frustrating things is it's quite dry. You don't get told, it doesn't say Jesus said angrily or Jesus laughed and said. It just says Jesus said, and you don't get the tone of voice. And so it's hard sometimes to know what kind of mood Jesus is in as he's saying certain things. But here, we do get told exactly how Jesus is feeling. We're told that in response to seeing the pain of Mary and those who had come to comfort her, that he weeps. Not only that, though, we're told that he was greatly disturbed. And I'm told, I'm not a Greek scholar, but I'm told that the Greek verb that we've translated as greatly disturbed is actually kind of more commonly associated with anger. Jesus was angry. He's upset and he is angry. Not at the people around him. Jesus is upset and he is angry at the situation, at the pain, at the brokenness, at the suffering. It is, I think, sometimes comforting, isn't it, to think that everything that happens to us, good or bad, is all just part of kind of God's big plan. It perhaps helps us sometimes, doesn't it, to make sense of the suffering and the pain that we see around us. I think it's comforting, except, I think, when it is us that is suffering. It's comforting when we see someone else and go, well, God must have a plan for that situation. But I think when it's us in the midst of that, when our pain and our kind of brokenness is just almost too much to handle, I don't know how comforting it is then to think that God is somehow kind of distant, sitting there pushing chess pieces around a board, playing with my life, allowing or making this happen so that something else might come out of it. So I like this passage. I like that Jesus is upset. I like that he is angry. I like that he, in that moment, through those emotions, acknowledges that this is not the way things are meant to be. That this is not just part of just some big plan, but that this is wrong. That illness and death and suffering and pain were not and never were intended to be part of God's creation. That they are painful and it hurts. And he feels that too. And so, whilst it is always dangerous to build a kind of whole theology from just one passage or one verse, I certainly think that in today's passage at least, the events that happen were not caused by God as some way of kind of testing the sisters' faith or as some part of kind of a larger plan. And of course you could argue, couldn't you, that, well, had this not happened, had Lazarus not died, the people there, Mary and Martha and the disciples and those that had come to comfort the sisters, wouldn't have got to witness the amazing miracle that followed. And they would have missed out on seeing something of God's glory and of Jesus' true identity as the resurrection and the life. But you see, this miracle, as fantastic and amazing and as wonderful as it is, it doesn't erase all that goes before. Yes, Lazarus is brought back from the dead. The sisters are reunited with their brother. But the hurt and the fear and the anguish and the pain, they all still happened. And I can't say for certain, but I'm fairly sure that if they had the choice, those two women would have forgone the miracle to have saved themselves that pain. There's a rabbi who had a son called Aaron, who was, when he was 3 years old, he was diagnosed with a premature aging disease. His parents were told that he would never grow to be more than 3 feet tall. He'd never have hair in his head, and he would look like a wizened old man. And worst of all, that he would never reach adulthood. Devastated, they tried to make the most of his short life, wanting his life to matter and for him to be remembered. All the time they wrestled with their own questions of prayer and God. And then Aaron died at the age of 14. And years later, his father wrote these words: "I am a more sensitive person, a more effective pastor, a more sympathetic counsellor because of Aaron's life than I would ever have been without it. And I would give up all of those gains in a second if I could have my son back. If I could choose, I would forego all the spiritual growth and depth which has come my way because of our experiences and be what I was 15 years ago, an average rabbi, an indifferent counsellor, helping some people and unable to help others, and the father of a bright, healthy boy. But I cannot choose." And of course, Jesus' tears and anger would appear, wouldn't they, to be out of place if this was just part of some big plan to show God's glory and power. And it isn't just, I think, that Jesus sees and feels our pain, but he identifies and understands it too. We see at the end of our reading that this is the incident that moves the Pharisees to begin to plan to put Jesus to death. And so therefore it starts his journey towards the cross, where we see just how far God is willing to go to be with us and for us, even to the point of suffering unjustly and dying the death of a criminal. And in the resurrection, just as in the raising of Lazarus, we see that God's solidarity and love is stronger than anything, even death. And so when we find ourselves in the midst of a tough time, when we're facing our own pain and struggle, how are we able to locate God within that? Where should we find God within that pain? Well, I think that Jesus tells us to believe. Look at what he says to Martha. "I am the resurrection and the life. Those who believe in me, even though they die, will live. And everyone who lives and believes in me will never die." Do you believe this? Now, it's important, I think, to note that this isn't saying, believe in me and nothing bad will ever happen to you. Because the verse even says, Jesus says, those who believe in me, even though they die, will live. He acknowledges that tough times will still come. Belief in Jesus isn't some sort of protection against bad things happening. It's just that it's not the end of the story. And nor is it saying that we shouldn't be upset about the things that we're facing. Because remember, Jesus, who knew better than anyone that death here is not forever and the promise of eternity and the coming kingdom, he still wept. Because, as one commentator puts it, knowing the end of the story doesn't mean that you don't cry at the sad parts. But when we believe that death and pain and illness and suffering are not the end of the story, when we cling on to the glimmer of hope, and sometimes it is just a glimmer, and that clinging is literally by our fingertips. But when we cling on to that glimmer of hope, onto the promise of eternity and resurrection power, then we rob death and pain of the hold that they might otherwise have over us. As one writer puts it, God's promise of resurrection isn't an invitation to deny death. The death rate in my community is the same as yours, 1 per person and 100%. But God's promise of resurrection does grant us both the permission and power to defy it, to defy death's ability to overshadow and distort our lives, to deny death's threat that there is nothing else, to deny those who did believe because they have the ability to inflict death that they are the most powerful people on earth. This story and the Easter story it prefigures promises that death does not have the last word, and therefore that we are free to live now, to struggle now, to sacrifice now, to encourage others never to give up now, to live out of love rather than hate now, and to have our actions directed by hope rather than fear now. And so might you know God's comforting presence alongside you. Might you know in the midst of whatever it is that you are struggling with, that God stands with you and weeps with you and says that this is not the way it is meant to be. And might you believe and know that this is not the end of the story. Amen. I'm going to just have a time of response. I'm going to play a song through the sound system, and there'll just be an image on the screen. If you find the image helpful, look at it. If you don't find it helpful, just close your eyes. But I encourage you that as you listen to the song and listen to the words of the song, just give over to God what it is that you are struggling with. And allow God's presence to be made known to you this morning.
Lord, I'm tired. So tired from walking, and Lord, I'm so alone. And Lord, the dark is creeping in, it's creeping up to swallow me. I think I'll stop and rest here a while. This is all that I can say right now, and this is all that I can give, and this this is all that I can say right now. This is all that I can give. That's my everything. Oh, did you see me crying? Oh, and did you hear me call your name? And wasn't it you I gave my heart to? I wish you'd remember where you set it down. And this is all that I can say right now. I know it's not much, but this is all that I can give. Yeah, that's my everything. This is all that I can say right now, right now. No, it's not much, but this is all that I can give. Yeah, that's my everything. Didn't notice you were standing here. I didn't know that was you holding me. I didn't notice you were crying too. I didn't know that was you washing my feet. And this is all that I can say right now. Oh, I know it's not much, but this is all that I can give. Yeah, that's my everything. This is all that I can say right now, right now. No, it's not much, but this is all that I can give. Yeah, that's my everything. This is all that I can say right now. Oh, I know it's not much, but this is all that I can give. Yeah, that's my everything. Yeah, that's my everything. Yeah, that's my everything. Everything.
Sorry. Heavenly Father, may we seek you and find you. May we knock and the door be opened, for we are looking for your kingdom. And as we encounter suffering in this world, turn our hearts, our ears, our eyes, our souls toward Christ, who emptied himself and was tempted and suffered for us. And in this suffering, plant seeds of hope. And let us never stray so far into despair that we forget the resurrection of Christ and the power of his Spirit. Amen. In choosing songs for this morning, there weren't a lot of worship songs that I felt fit with what I was talking about. And so in that sense, or in that kind of, in those moments where I can't find a song that fits, I just pick songs I like. So we're going to sing my favourite hymn. Shall we stand together and sing, "And Can It Be?" Please do stay and have tea and coffee, and we've got cakes again this week, so you're not allowed out the door until you've had at least one cake. But as you do go from this place, may you know that the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness can never extinguish it. Amen.